The morning fog rolls over a quiet field. Broken spears lie scattered like bones. Somewhere in that mist, the sound of boots fades not in triumph but retreat. For centuries, Rome was unstoppable. From the burning deserts of Africa to the snow of Britannia, her legions crushed kings, enslaved nations, and bent the world to her will. Every banner she raised became a symbol of order, discipline, and fear. But there were places, far beyond the edges of her maps, that refused to kneel. Lands so wild, so stubborn, or so clever that even the greatest empire on earth could not tame them. And though they were far apart, divided by forests, mountains, and endless sand, they shared one thing. They were the lands Rome could never conquer. But before we reach those frontiers, before the forests swallowed legions and deserts burned ambition, we must first remember what made Rome believe she could conquer anything at all. By the 1st century, Rome had no equal. From the sands of Egypt to the icy rivers of the Danube, her banners stretched farther than any before. Her armies marched like living machines, precise, relentless, unbreakable. Every legion was a moving fortress, carrying its own engineers, doctors, and smiths. They built bridges where there were none, carved roads through mountains, and raised stone walls in a single day. Rome's strength did not lie only in her weapons, but in her order. Her soldiers fought as one body, breathing, striking, and dying together. Wherever they marched, civilization followed, markets, temples, laws, and Latin words that reshaped the world. They had faced everything: desert heat that blinded men, mountain snow that froze them in armor, swarming cavalry that thundered like storms, and tribes that screamed their gods' names as they charged. And yet Rome always adapted. A nation of farmers had become masters of siegecraft, naval power, and empire. Every defeat was studied, every enemy dissected until their weakness became Rome's lesson. When the dust cleared and the smoke rose, the Roman eagle always lifted again, gleaming above ruins and silence. To their enemies, it was a symbol of terror. To Rome, it was destiny. But destiny is never satisfied. The Senate and the generals looked at their maps and saw only one question left: what lay beyond? Beyond the Rhine stretched the forests of Germania, endless, dark, and whispering with danger. Beyond Britannia's rolling hills lay a land of mist and mountain, where painted warriors vanished into the fog, Caledonia. And to the far east, across burning deserts, an ancient empire watched with its own kind of pride, Parthia, the land of kings and archers. Each frontier was different, untamed in its own way. To most, they were warnings, lands where even the sun seemed foreign. But to Rome, they were invitations, unwritten pages waiting for her legend. And so once more, the legions marched. Into the trees, into the fog, into the desert, not knowing that beyond those horizons waited the three lands even Rome could not conquer. The year was 9 CE. Beyond the Rhine lay a wilderness that Roman maps called Germania Magna, a land of deep forests, endless rain, and tribes who answered to no king. For Rome, it was the next frontier. For the men who entered it, it became a grave. The man leading them was Publius Quinctilius Varus, a loyal governor and veteran of campaigns long past. He believed Germania could be tamed as easily as Gaul, through law, roads, and the sight of a Roman standard. Behind him marched 3 legions, the 17th, 18th, and 19th. Nearly 20,000 men, disciplined, armed, and certain of victory. Among their guides rode a man Rome trusted above all others, Arminius. He spoke fluent Latin, had served under Roman command, and wore the insignia of citizenship. To Varus, he was proof that Germania could be civilized. To the tribes, he was something else entirely, a spark waiting to ignite. For days, the legions wound through narrow paths under endless trees. Rain soaked their armor, turning the ground to rivers of mud. Thunder rolled over the canopy, and the forest pressed close, dark and silent. Then, without warning, Arminius and his riders vanished ahead. Moments later, the woods exploded. Spears rained down from every side. War cries pierced the storm as Germanic warriors burst from the shadows, painted, furious, unstoppable. The Romans tried to form ranks, but the road was too tight, the terrain too cruel. Shields slipped, horses fell, and discipline dissolved into panic. For 3 days, the ambush never ended. Every attempt to retreat only led them deeper into the killing ground. When the last sword fell silent, the forest floor was buried beneath Roman bodies. The 17th, 18th, and 19th, entire legions erased. When the news reached Rome, horror followed. Emperor Augustus tore his robe and shouted, "Varus, give me back my legions." But they were gone, their standards lost, their bones scattered beneath German soil. Rome had met something she couldn't outthink or outfight, a land that fought back with its own silence. From then on, the empire drew its line at the Rhine. Fortresses rose, watchtowers burned through the night, but beyond the river lay a shadow Rome would never cross again. Germania had given the empire its first lesson in limits, that even the mightiest machine can vanish in a storm of trees and rain. Yet the hunger for conquest never fades. And not long after, Rome turned her eyes west again, to the islands beyond the sea, where mist clung to the mountains and warriors painted their bodies for war. Another frontier awaited, one colder, wilder, and no less defiant. The legions marched once more, this time, into the highlands of Caledonia. Hannibal rode to the center of the line, watching the shape of his trap complete itself, a perfect encirclement. Dust and screams filled the air as his cavalry closed in from behind, sealing the ring. The Romans were surrounded, 80,000 men trapped in a circle less than a kilometer wide. The killing began in earnest. At first, the Romans fought desperately. The outer ranks slashed outward, hacking at the Carthaginians closing in from every direction. But there was no escape. Those in the middle could do nothing but listen to the sounds of dying men, the crash of shields, the panic spreading like fire. The crush became unbearable. Soldiers couldn't breathe, couldn't move, crushed by the weight of their comrades pressing forward in blind terror. Some suffocated where they stood before an enemy blade even reached them. As the sun climbed higher, the battlefield turned into a furnace. The air shimmered with heat, the dust thick as smoke. Blood pooled beneath fallen bodies, mixing with mud and sweat. The once proud Roman banners lay trampled underfoot. Officers shouted themselves hoarse, trying to restore order, but no one could hear. The sound was beyond human, an ocean of agony and chaos. Hannibal's men fought with ruthless efficiency. The Gauls and Iberians who had once pretended to break now surged forward again, joining the circle of death. They had lost friends that morning. Now they took their vengeance. The African veterans cut through the Roman ranks with practiced precision, their curved blades flashing in the sunlight. Hannibal's cavalry dismounted and joined the slaughter, tightening the noose inch by inch. From a nearby hill, the Carthaginian officers watched in awe. Never before had such a maneuver been executed on this scale, not in all of history. It was not just victory, it was annihilation. The Roman army, the greatest force the Republic had ever fielded, was being erased before their eyes. Hours passed. The fighting did not end, it collapsed. The Roman formation broke down entirely, not from retreat but from suffocation. Men fell where they stood, their armor crushing them under piles of corpses. Others tried to flee toward the river, only to be cut down by cavalry waiting at the banks. By mid-afternoon, the battlefield was silent save for the cries of the wounded and the cawing of circling birds. When the sun began to fall, the extent of the horror became clear. Nearly 80,000 Romans lay dead or dying. Only a few thousand escaped. Entire legions had ceased to exist. The plain of Cannae, once golden with grain, was now red with blood. Hannibal dismounted and walked among the fallen, silent, grim, his victory complete. His officers approached, cheering his genius. Some urged him to march on Rome immediately to end the war in one final strike. But Hannibal looked out across the carnage, the mountains of bodies, the stillness after so much death, and said nothing. He had achieved the impossible, but at a terrible cost. His army, though victorious, was exhausted, their supplies low, and Rome's heart was still beating behind its walls. In the Roman camp far to the north, word of the disaster arrived slowly, then all at once. Senators wept in public. Mothers tore their hair in the streets. 1 in every 3 men who had marched to Cannae would never return. The Republic itself seemed ready to collapse. For a moment, the world believed Rome was finished. But in that silence, something inside Rome hardened. They forbade mourning in public. Grief was replaced with fury. The Senate swore that the Republic would rise again. They would rebuild their armies, no matter how many generations it took. Hannibal had destroyed their legions, but he had also awakened something far more dangerous, Rome's relentless will to survive. As night fell over Cannae, Hannibal's campfires burned across the horizon. He had done what no general before him had ever done. He had annihilated the greatest army on earth in a single afternoon. Yet even he knew this was not the end. It was the beginning of something far greater. The field that had seen the death of 80,000 men would become a lesson whispered through centuries, the perfect battle, the perfect trap. And from its ashes, Rome would rise stronger, colder, and more determined than ever before. Because while Hannibal won the day, Rome would go on to win the world. And in the days after the battle, the plains of Cannae became a graveyard stretching beyond sight. Survivors wandered aimlessly among the dead, unable to comprehend the scale of what had happened. Entire legions had vanished. Fathers, sons, and brothers lay piled together in silence. The stench of decay hung heavy in the air, a grim reminder that even Rome's might could be broken. Hannibal's men built pyres for their own fallen, but there were too many Roman bodies to bury. The land itself became their tomb. In Rome, disbelief turned to horror. The Senate received reports so catastrophic that some believed them exaggerated, until the tattered survivors arrived. Public mourning swept the city, but grief quickly gave way to resolve. Temples filled with prayers, the streets with vows of vengeance. The Senate declared new levies, drafting men barely of age and even slaves willing to fight. Yet amid the despair, one figure stood out: Fabius Maximus, the delayer. His strategy of caution, once mocked as cowardice, became Rome's lifeline. He urged restraint, patience, and survival above pride. Rome would not give Hannibal another Cannae. The battlefield was lost, but the spirit of Rome endured. And from that silent, blood-soaked plain, the Republic began its slow march back from the edge of extinction, not through triumph, but through endurance. Cannae was not just a battle. It was a reminder of how quickly order turns to chaos, how swiftly certainty collapses into dust. Hannibal's name would echo through the centuries, not merely for what he destroyed, but for what he revealed: the fragility beneath all greatness. His victory was flawless, yet fleeting. Rome's fall that day was absolute, yet its recovery unstoppable. Between those two truths lies the essence of history. Nothing lasts, except the will to endure. Empires, armies, ambitions, all meet their Cannae eventually, but survival belongs to those who can face ruin without surrendering to it. So as you think of that field, of men who believed themselves invincible until the earth swallowed them whole, ask yourself this: when the world turns against you, when every plan collapses, do you break under the weight of failure, or learn, adapt, and rise again?